Jesse Elder.
Storey.
This one's been a long time coming.
It really has.
And I was so happy when you knocked on the door because we're good friends, and therefore this is much less work for me. You know,
I get it.
Not that it's ever really work in the truest sense. I mean, any, construction worker listening will be like, yeah, you don't do real work anyway.
Right.
But, there is a certain amount of energy that goes into meeting someone for the first time and kind of building rapport and feeling into them and getting their vibe and ensuring that I can create the most impactful conversation. And with you, I already know you. So it's just like, oh, we're just hanging out like we would any other day.
This is just like recording one of our normal conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the first thing I want to cover with you. And that is, which could take 5 or 6 hours in and of itself, and isn't even the topic really, but is the idea of time. And I know this is something you play with a lot. You're the time piercer, right? And you have this mystic sort of time ninja perspective that I find really interesting. So first, I'm going to give you my cartoonish Flintstonian understanding of the fact that there's no time.
Yeah.
The way I look at it is like this, and it's best done on like a blackboard.
Mm-hmm.
So those watching the video, you'll see my hand movements. The rest of you will just imagine this. So there's a line that is perpendicular to the ground, right? So there's a line, horizontal line, and on one end is infinity, and on the other end is infinity. What I perceive to be the now is one spot where I stop on that line, and it seems like there's the time of now because the perception of my senses is only able to perceive that particular moment. And so I would call that the now, being in the now, right? And then without knowing better, I would look at 10 years ago as somewhere that has to come from memory that doesn't exist anymore, or the future on the other side of the line as a fantasy of what I believe might happen. But in reality, that infinite line that has no beginning and no end is all one eternal moment.
Yes.
And when I look at life that way, it becomes much more fun and less serious and gives me access to go into the past and reconcile things that I felt before were locked away in some realm of memory, and also makes my future seem more malleable and at the whim of my creativity.
I think that last part especially is really useful because for I think most of us look at the future as this completely unknown thing, and the best you can do is sort of extrapolate past experiences into the future and then avoid the past painful experiences if they come up again, and do the best to replicate the positive ones in some way that, ties in with our dreams. But it's this it's too whimsical for a lot of people. Or they go hyper-logical and they're just trying to plan for every single possible way, and then they just get over-scripted and end up missing, all these cues on, what might actually be good for them. And I love the way you said it about this continuum of infinity. And when I first started playing around with this, and I just kept asking questions, and the big things that came up for me were, memory and imagination. These are, if time is made of 3 things, past, present, and future, and only one of them is verifiable, which is, as you said, the now, then memory, you can only have a memory now, and you can only imagine the future now. So that really, past and future also only exist now. So then there's like, shit, okay, well then neither of those is real except now. So I started to think about it this way. If like this localized experience of consciousness that we're having, this sensory, physically located experience of life. We're here in your home, and we're on these cool chairs, and we've got these clothes, and we've got these bodies. So this is a concentrated experience of consciousness. But is that the only part of reality that our consciousness can experience? And I would say that it's not. Because and again, this is completely anecdotal, and this is probably poetic license more than anything that can be scientifically verified right now. But we're like the user, having the user experience, and this body is like an app. It's like an interface within the OS of this time and space, this dimension. But we've all had the experience of being, on our laptop or on our computer or on our phone, and it's like you're typing to somebody, but you're listening to a song while you're getting, watching your crypto or whatever, and you're getting incoming messages. You, the user, are having all of these experiences simultaneously, and it can be overwhelming, but it's also very enriching because you're having all these experiences tied together that are part of your life experience, and yet you're only experiencing them on just this like one screen. But each of those applications, Spotify or SoundCloud or Telegram or whatever, they are siloed experiences that don't have anything to do with each other. If Telegram had a consciousness, it wouldn't be like, oh, I'm operating with SoundCloud right now. It's just siloed experience that only at the level of the user are they joined in this sort of sensory thing. All that to say, it just started to make sense to me that if we do have a soul that's like the ultimate operator of this consciousness, would that soul be limited to this time and this place? Probably not. So if the soul isn't bound by time the way that we are in this dimension, then that means it could access all of the localized experiences at once and be just having like all these tabs open, like, whoa.
Through multitudes of avatars.
Infinite avatars.
Yeah.
Even avatars that are this consciousness. Like Luke's story has a lot of past Lukes. The one that you lived, all the perceptions of all the actual memories that you've got, the experiences you've had, but also parallel memories. There's a lot of other ways that it could have gone.
Totally.
That, you're here. And then the future just fractals out even more. So I think all of those exist. And that higher self or that oversoul or whatever people want to call it is observing and experiencing all of them simultaneously. And it's just enriching the user experience of the soul.
Check this out. With everything that's going on with our food, air, and water, detoxing is no longer optional. And if you really want vitality, it's an absolute must. One of the best ways to remove toxins from the body is through sweating. But did you know that not all sweat is created equal? When you hop into an infrared sauna, the light is absorbed deeply by the body, causing your cells to vibrate. And that raises core temperature and enhances natural metabolic processes, pulling out nasty toxins like aluminum, cadmium, and even mercury. The sauna I use on the reg is my Amplify full spectrum sauna from Sunlighten. Sunlighten's patented and science-backed technology provides the most effective, high-quality, near, mid, and far infrared available. They actually have 4 different sauna collections, each of which features different combinations of light and varying aesthetics to fit both your needs and your decor. And with any Sunlighten sauna, you can rest assured that you're going to sweat fast, sweat deep, and support your detox. And by the way, you can learn what makes Sunlighten my top pick on the Lifestylist podcast, episode 477, so make sure to check that out if you want the deep dive. And then when you're ready to treat yourself to the world's best infrared sauna, visit get.sunlighten.com/LukeStory and use the code LukeStory to save up to $600. You can also find that link in the show notes on your podcast app. And obviously, it would make 0 sense to detox while exposing yourself to high levels of EMF. And that's why Sunlighten designed their heating panels to produce almost none, so you can relax and detox safely. Again, that link is get.sunlighten.com/LukeStory, and the code is LukeStory. Well, this brings me to another realization / conundrum that has really broken my mind. And that is, I don't know why exactly, because I wasn't raised in any sort of dogmatic belief system that was inclusive of reincarnation, but it's just something I don't remember when I first became aware of the concept, but I was just always on board with it. Like, well, yeah, duh, right?
Yeah.
And, some of it has to do with some of the spiritual teachings from which I've benefited, and it seems to kind of fit in the model, the Vedic worldview and so on. but I'm not one of those people that has had many past life experiences or memories, with the exception of one occasion. But I feel like I've been here before. I feel like I've known people that I'm here with, especially Allison. I mean, there's just this is not our first rodeo. There's just no way. But what trips me out about that is when I try to reconcile what I also feel is true, that there really is no time, there is no past, now, and future. There's just one big eternity. Then the idea of a past life would be negated, and it would just be another life.
Right.
That's also happening in the eternal now.
Dude,
so
this is good.
It's not like there was that my soul incarnated in 1432 and lived in Greece.
Right.
And then fast forward time that doesn't exist, and now there's a Luke story that exists, from 1970 until now.
Yeah.
It's that the eternal soul, to your point, is experiencing all of these avatar lifetimes in one simultaneous eternal now.
Yes.
And that's just, I don't even know what to do with that. It just makes my head explode, because the logical part of me wants to create a linear sequence, not only of this lifetime, because that's a lot to manage in and of itself, but it wants to create a linear experience of multitudes of lifetimes through the model of reincarnation.
Well, and I think that we have, do you know the term ethnocentricity? That it's the bias.
I've heard the word
towards the best.
Okay.
So somebody grows up in I don't know, they grow up in Mississippi and they're Southern Baptist and they're just like, that is the best religion. Well, why? Well, because I'm in it. It's like, why would I be in something that's not the best? Or like, Americans are like, America. Like, have you traveled? Well, yeah, I went to Cancun one weekend. It's like, so how do you know America's the best? Well, because just look at it. But it's that bias of ethnocentricity, the tendency to believe that where we are is the best possible thing. Otherwise, why would we be here? And I think what you just said made me think of that, because like we're here right now and we want to believe that like this is it. Like we're here, I've reached the ultimate, or I'm learning my lessons, and that other thing isn't there anymore. But I mean, there's no proof that it's not there. Just because, I can't see my truck parked outside, I'm pretty sure it's there, but I don't know for sure that it's there. But if I were to be looking at, a satellite view or, drone view of the house, I could clearly see, oh, these guys are inside and the truck is there. So it just comes down to perspective, I think. And we don't have that perspective from inside of this brain and inside of these senses, other than to conceptualize. But we tend to carry that conceptualization of time and try and make it fit into a place or non-place where time doesn't exist in the same way, and that's when our brains break a little bit. But and that's why I stopped probably when I was 20 years old. I stopped asking what's true, and I just started asking what's useful. Is this a useful belief for me to have? Cool, game on. Like, I don't need to be able to convince anybody, even in all of my teaching and all of my courses and clients and everything. Like, I'm like, this is a description of what I found useful. This is not a prescription of what you should believe. And that in itself seems to be useful.
What do you find in terms of the value of being willing to let go of these tightly held concepts around time?
Yeah.
This is something that I fight with a lot, because I really struggle with calendars, clocks, dates. I mean, I'm just like having a hard time my whole life just wrestling my persona as who I am into that system. And then you throw in like daylight savings and time zones, and I'm just like, I'm on the wrong planet.
Yeah. It's purely arbitrary.
And some people have a very easy time just kind of like adapting to that system. So I really struggle with it. And I feel like the looser I get with the attachment to the ideas we're discussing, just throw the whole thing out and create one endless eternity, it makes it even worse, because then I have to fight even harder. Okay, like I got to really come down and get granular here to operate and start a podcast when Jesse walks through the door and not be like out in the backyard meditating or something. You know?
Well, the way that's made the most sense to me, and why I continue to explore this, is especially related to the future, because if the future is completely unwritten, and if we're using the old or the common model of, well, let me take all my known past experiences and try and, do the best I can in the future. Like, man, there's so many variables, the stuff that hasn't been invented yet for us, beliefs that aren't widely known. Like, I mean, I didn't know, the 80% of the stuff that runs my life today, I had no clue about 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So for me to assume, based on my current beliefs, current skills, current confidence levels, current relationships, for me to assume that I know what the ideal future is based on all of these knowns, that just doesn't make sense to me. But what started to make sense to me is when I got really curious about, like, well, what is imagination? And I had some bonker experiences that were real enough for me to trust and to test. And one of the things that I started to understand is that if all of these selves are operating simultaneously, like if you go up, I don't know, a dimension, if you go up a little bit and you see that all of these Lukes and all of these Jessies are having their experience in one ultimate time field, but from this place, it's just one time field at a time, but you can access the other ones through memory or imagination. Well, that means that us today, you can remember, like you could remember the last time we hung out, or maybe more usefully, you could remember a time when you were a kid and it was like a Saturday afternoon and you were just like laying on the grass and looking at the clouds and seeing if you could like change the cloud shape with your mind and all this. You could go back to a specific memory. And I believe that kid could imagine his future and could imagine, well, I wonder what I'll be like when I'm like in my 50s. That imagination of that kid and the lived experience of the man today is the same thought. Like, it's the same idea. The man today is living that. So it's a denser idea because it's in sight and sound and touch. That kid back then could only envision it and maybe feel it. But what if it's the same idea? And then I started to think about like just thought energy, which nobody knows what it is, but it's obviously something. And it can't just be a chemical file that's stored in your brain. How do you account for intuition? How do you account for, you're a musician and you know what it feels like when you get in the pocket and all of a sudden something just starts happening that you don't know where it's coming from, but it's coming and you're just like along for the ride. Where's that coming from? Yes, it might be a sort of composite creation of influences, but any musician, any artist knows that there's just this thing that happens and you're just there. Like, it just happens.
I'm experiencing a lot of that writing this book I'm working on.
Yeah. Well, so this is where...
It's so fun.
It's super fun.
It's fun to watch whatever the muse is.
Right.
Use my fingers
to
write a book.
And to me, this is what's so fascinating.
It also removes a lot of the fear and self-judgment because I'm like, I'm not doing it. It's not me.
Right. Well, it wouldn't be there without you.
I'm kind of the vessel through which it's going, and it has my imprint, but I'm not forcing an idea of a sentence or a concept or paragraph to come to fruition. I just kind of am like, turning the rudder a little bit. And I know what direction I'm going, but the wind is going to, have the velocity that the wind has. And then I end up in some destination. Well, how did I get here? All I did was just kind of like turn the rudder.
So that was a perfect setup, because if thought energy, for lack of a better term, is omnipresent, is just like this field, just like these phones. If my phone's on airplane mode, all I can play are the songs that are already loaded on the phone, which is maybe 100 different tracks and, musical pieces and voice memos. But I can't access all the tracks on SoundCloud or all the songs on Spotify or all the videos on YouTube, because that's in the cloud. But where's the cloud? Like, it's here. So if I take the phone off airplane mode, all of a sudden I can access every single song on the internet, because the phone is not the container, it's a conduit. All those songs already exist. Take that idea, or take that example, and then just think about if thought energy, that is all thought that has ever been thought, can be thought, is possible to be thought, if that operates as a sort of cloud where all of these thoughts exist, then our brains, our minds, our bodies, if we're not on airplane mode and we can start accessing those thoughts, then what if the version of you that has already written that song or already written that book is looking at the finished product going, fuck yeah, this is good. And in that moment of just intense presence of completion, that thought is so potent. It's like a beacon. It's like it emits something. And then here you are, else when, like you're over in your now and he's in his now, in what for you would be the future. And to him, you are the past. And what if he's thinking about you going, bro, you got to see this thing. This thing is epic. And you're tapping into that same sort of energy that he's in. And you're getting the ideas and the words just start flowing. And now you're in that thing. Well, what if you're being remembered by your future self? And what if that's what imagination is? What if imagination is when you're being remembered by your future self?
Right.
Dude, it changes everything.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah, that's like it's kind of a very interesting take on the idea of manifestation, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like this idea that you're drawing the experience that you want to yourself. When I intuit, it's more like the experience is pulling you to it because it already exists.
It already exists.
Right.
And here's where
it's not like you have to create something. The thing is created. It's just not in material.
Right. Which is
manifest form.
It's like 0.001% of the manifestation is the physical reality. Everything else is the frequency. And then it just forms into the physical form of the established frequency, the established thought form. And I think we'll get into it today, but one of the biggest crimes that's happened in the last couple hundred years is the complete removal of discretionary time for children. They're so controlled. Their time is controlled. They're under surveillance and observation constantly. There's so many absolutely sinister things that happen. And I'm not talking about adrenochrome and all of that. I mean, literally observable things that are happening to destroy intuition, to destroy individuality, to destroy free thinking. And so if a child somehow manages to either survive that or avoid it altogether, then I think you stay in that childlike place where, like when we were kids, I mean, there's no healthy child anywhere that like plans out their play and like optimizes for efficiency. You know, it's like you have to
plan the monkey bars for 15 minutes, then I'll transition into the soccer ball.
Right. And then I'm going to test that compared to last Friday and see which performed better. You know, it's like, you don't do that because you're present and you're just following your heart and your flow and doing what feels fun to you. So the process of creation or creativity, I began to experience that when I would consciously give like love and attention and appreciation to past versions of myself, especially, and you got to be a little bit tranced out to do this, like alpha, theta, or, you know, a softer meditative state. But if you can go back to just before a really intense experience happened, like I used to fight in the early 90s, like when UFC first came out. So hardly anybody knew what jiu-jitsu was. I was fortunate enough to have been training and learning from the Gracies and from my instructor who trained with them. So I knew more jiu-jitsu than anybody else in these fights. And it was such an unfair advantage because nobody else knew anything. So I started fighting in these no-holds-barred fights at this club in San Antonio, this nightclub. And it was no rules, no time limit, no weight limit, and no safety equipment. So like literally like bare knuckle, you couldn't bite, you couldn't eye gouge, and you couldn't like fish hook. But if you want to elbow the dude in the back of the head, go for it. If you want to punch him in the nuts, you can do that too. Like nothing was off limits.
Oh my God.
And I realized I have to do this because I'd been teaching martial arts, you know, since I was 15, Taekwondo, but I'd never actually been tested, you know, like in the real world. And this is as close as you could get. So I fought and I had 11 fights that year. I won 9 and I lost 2. And one of the fights that I lost, The dude was about 30 pounds heavier, just badass kickboxer, but he had coated his body in baby oil to prevent me from grappling.
Smart.
It worked. And I could not get a hold of that dude. I ate so many punches in this like 15-minute match, and I ended up going to the hospital. And I had a collapsed lung, and I had like a concussion, and it was pretty messed up. And the reason I share all that, because that night in the hospital was so intense, and it was so like devastating at the time. You know, I'm like 20 years old. This was like the fight of my life. I thought I was going to win some prize money to open my karate school. And now like I've got who knows how many thousands of dollars in medical debt, and I don't have insurance. I just got my ass kicked. All of my students are probably going to quit. Who wants to train with a loser? Like all that was going on. Plus I already had like very low self-esteem, and I was like questioning my purpose in life. And so this was like the thing was supposed to, you know, propel me. I remember laying in the hospital bed that night, looking up at these glaring hospital lights and just asking myself, like, how am I doing? And the answer that came back was, I'm fine. I was like, well, who's the me that just got his ass kicked, and who's the me that's fine? And dude, it was like cosmic Google just opened up, and here's all this information. It's like, you have a body, but you're not your body. And I'm like, well, what am I then? And I'm looking at the hospital lights, and all of a sudden it hits me. That light is illuminated because there's electricity flowing through it. But if you hit the switch and the electricity withdraws from the bulb goes dark. But it's the exact same like molecular composition. It's the same weight. It's everything. It's just not illuminated. But nothing happens to the energy. And dude, I got it. I was like, oh, these bodies, they're light bulbs. And they're just lit up with this energy, and we call that alive. And then at some point, the energy withdraws and the bulb goes dark, and we call that dead. But nothing happened to the electricity, man. Nothing happened to the energy. It still retains itself. It still knows what it is. It's just not in that body anymore. And I never was really afraid of death, but I could not take death seriously after that. Like I just completely stopped believing in it. I'm like, it's a scam. Don't fall for it.
How old were you?
20. 20. So in going back and revisiting that night in the weeks afterwards, because I didn't want to, even back then I had a sense that I don't want to absorb some kind of trauma of like, oh, I want to avoid martial arts, or that's dangerous. I'm like, that's how your world gets small, man. I want my world to get bigger from this experience. So I had multiple journaling, meditation sessions, like many things over the next couple of months, until I reached the point where I was not only okay that the experience happened, I was glad it happened, to reach the point that I had, like, I'll get emotional talking about, man, I have so much love for that dude. Like for doing what he felt he needed to do in order to win the match, to help me have such a leading edge experience that became the raw fuel for self-definition and understanding what this dimension is. I would not have gotten it if not for that guy. So in all that work of going back and seeing what else could this have happened for, I began to develop a relationship with, you know, me in that moment, and then the me that was in the hospital bed. And it wasn't until years later when I started to understand or explore this whole time piercing thing. What if, when I was in that hospital bed asking these questions, what if I'm the one that was answering? So I began to develop this sort of circular relationship with my past self. And then I started to experience that, well, shit, if that's the case, and I can't prove that it is, and you can't prove that it's not, if the insights that I was getting were from some version of me in the future that had already kind of figured it out, well, then isn't there another future version of me who's not only willing, but highly motivated to do the same thing for me, to ensure that they end up existing? So I started to do this little ritual where I would give a lot of love and appreciation to some past version of me and be like, all right, future self, your turn. And I know there's a lot of you, so highest and best, what's it going to be? Ideas would just start to hit that seemed like out of nowhere. totally nonlinear, completely abstract, but feeling so right. Random stuff. Like I back in 2014, I was starting to make some money. I had freedom and free time, and I'd sold my karate schools. And I'm like, all right, future self, what's up? Like, what am I going to do? So I drop in this prime light or this meditation, and I just get this immediate answer. It was like, go to Bucharest. And I was like, I can't even find it on the map. Like, I don't even know where it is. But it was such a clear signal, go to Bucharest. So I'm like, cool. So I ended up organizing an event in Bucharest. 3 weeks later, I fly there. And there's this auditorium. There's 298 Romanians that show up and just delivered this full day improv, action philosophy, comedy, spirituality. And it was epic. And I don't know why I went. I just know that, hey, I'm supposed to do this. It turns out that I met some of my best friends, had the time of my life. It became such a reference point for trusting that like very tactical intuition. And then when I was on stage and in the days after, reflecting on what an awesome experience it was, I could feel myself 3 weeks earlier asking, what should I do? And I felt a strong connection in Romania. I'm like, bro, you got to go. You got to come here. Like, it's incredible. So I just developed a trust in that. Like, there's certain ideas that they just hit different. And I think that we are, in those moments, we are being remembered by the optimal version of our future self who's remembering us. And in that, we get to experience this phenomenon called imagination. But I don't think we're making it up. I think we're just like seeing what's already happening. That's already, and that version has already come true. And we're just, there's no better coach in the world than your wiser, more you future self.
Wow. Beautiful. Like most people with the pulse, I love the taste of coffee. But what I don't like is the jitters and crash that often come with it. So to solve this, I went looking for a morning drink that gives me lasting energy without those pesky side effects. Well, that's exactly what I found when I discovered the incredible Nandaka formula from Peak. Nandaka is made with fermented pu'er teas that give you slow-release caffeine for sustained energy while supporting a healthy gut at the same time. And the ceremonial-grade Peruvian cacao in Nandaka helps rev up your metabolism and makes the compounds in Nandaka even more bioavailable. And it goes without saying, to make something part of my morning routine, it's got to taste incredible too. And this one does. It's like a creamy, spiced hot chocolate. To make my morning drink, I throw 1 sachet in a 1.5 cups of hot water, froth it for a few seconds, and I'm good to go. And for a limited time, you can get 15% off Nandaka, plus a free rechargeable frother and cup over at peaklife.com/Luke. That's PIQUELIFE, peaklife.com/Luke. And by the way, Nandaka also comes loaded with a blend of highly concentrated functional mushrooms like chaga, reishi, cordyceps, and lion's mane. All these ingredients work together to relieve stress and improve your mood. Nandaka is an awesome morning ritual. In fact, I've got a cup sitting on my desk right now to power me through these promos. So to get your hands on some of this stuff, head over to peaklife.com/Luke and get 15% off Nandaka, plus your free frother and cup, all for a limited time. Something you said really struck me. This is another thing I've contemplated, and I've had two, I probably had many, but there were two that stood out because the answers were so meaningful to me. Where I was in deep prayer, I felt really connected to God, and I asked questions, and the answers didn't come from, Charlton Heston's voice. Luke, here's your answer. It's like me talking to myself, but not the me right now that's asking the question. Right. It's an interesting kind of way. And I've tried to tell those stories sometimes, and I'm like, and then God told me, and I'm like, well, not really. Yes and no, but it was just me answering the question for myself. But if I already knew the answer in that moment, I wouldn't have asked the question. Right. There was one aspect of me, higher self, future self, whatever you want to call it, that had the answer. One of them was I was praying to God, and I said, will you will you please just protect me? And like that, it goes, you don't need protection because you're already safe. You know, it's hard to even, it sounds trite, but to feel that and know that in the moment, it was like, oh yeah, okay. That changes things quite a lot. In other words, like no harm can come to you. Yeah. Stop tripping. The other one was, actually it was when I had the only real past life experience I had. And I was observing how through it was like turning pages of a book, just flipping through lifetime after lifetime as someone in India who was seeking God. And it was just like reincarnation after reincarnation, getting burned on the Ganges over and over and over again. And I was reflecting on that, and I said, why do I keep going? Why do I keep coming back, trying to find God and get closer to God? And then I might have even said this out loud. It was in my first Bufo experience. And I said, because I want it all. And then just that fast, God goes, you already have it all. What are you doing? You made it. You're there. Stop seeking. And it wasn't like an egoic, you're enlightened type thing at all. It was just like, dude, you don't have to work this hard. What you're looking for is already here, And those two experiences have always stood out to me in that regard, that it's just like, I guess, me and God are one and the same, right? In the realm of consciousness, there's no separation. I'm just one unique expression of God. But it was very clear that the answers were coming from myself, not outside of myself. And there were two questions that were really important and two answers that really changed so many things in my day-to-day life when I remember them, But it's like, I used to just read all these spiritual books and go to the seminars. I'm just like, I got to find this thing, I was like, it was such a relief to know, like, dude, okay, you can keep doing that, but you don't really have to. You might maybe you could just live your life. Right?
Test it. Just try it out. Live your life.
Yeah. So that's beautiful.
That's amazing.
It's funny. I thought if we talked about this concept of time a bit, I thought, well, this is kind of an offshoot, but it really has to do with the main topic that I wanted to discuss with you, which is really sort of preparing for the future in the time that we live. I mean, so many things are uncertain, and especially now. I mean, what is it? October 30th today, I think.
31st.
Is it?
Yeah.
Today's the 31st?
Yeah.
So it's Halloween today?
I think so.
That's funny. See, I told you calendar.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. October 31st.
It's a holiday. I had no idea. Well, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. I'm dressing as last week's future self.
Right. Exactly. But in a few days, it's a meaningful day to many people. We have our selection that happens every few years. And I don't know. I mean, it could go either way, and either way could be great or horrible. Which I guess is just up to your interpretation. But it is a time that I think the human part of me is a bit nervous, just watching the progression of tyranny as it's unfolded over the past few years, and things kind of seem relatively stable. My life hasn't really objectively changed much, even through the pandemic. I mean, I remember having the realization one day that if I didn't have a cell phone or access to the internet, my life literally did not change one iota the entire time. With the exception of a few times I went out into public and someone would yell at me to put a piece of plastic on my face.
Right.
That was the only thing that was objectively different. But I did have and still have some, subconscious, sometimes fully conscious anxiety around my safety in the future. And so, that has to do with kind of earthbound time and how much energy me or anyone wants to put into kind of being prepared for what we might think of as worst case scenarios, in the realm of prepping. And so when we moved to Texas, I mean, I got some storable food and a generator and, make sure that I'm as armed as I feel I need to be and all the things, right? And kind of got things locked down a little bit, but I know in reality, in a full zombie apocalypse situation, I'm toast. Like I am totally ill-equipped if shit got real hairball, and we of course hope that it wouldn't. But I mean, if you look at any country or any civilization that's gone through civil war or complete, Mao revolution type things, I mean, it's like, that's a whole other level of preparedness when you have stormtroopers coming to take you and your family to a camp, or roving gangs of looters and so on. So I do my best to kind of live in this moment and remember that lesson I got, that you don't need protection because you are safe. And that might mean that even if I leave this body, as you described, if the light bulb gets turned off, I'm totally safe.
Right.
You can't kill my soul.
Nope.
Right. It's just around my attachments to my wife and my home and my friends. And I want to hang on to this earthly, millisecond of this lifetime and this experience I'm having as Luke's story. And I see that attachment, and it's probably good to have some attachment to that. Otherwise you would become apathetic perhaps and not do anything with your
just
life.
Like slip and trip out of your body, be like,
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm always kind of wrestling with like my level of attachment to form, and seeing the purpose in attachment to form, and wanting to be kind of prepared when the shit hits the fan, but not be overly paranoid about it. And so I think you, as the balanced guy that you are, and you're not even an out of the box thinker. You're a thinker that doesn't even know there are boxes. And that's why I love hanging out with you. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation. So I feel like you have a very moderate, balanced, sane view on preparedness, but it doesn't seem to be affecting you in a way where you're like building a bunker and you're totally paranoid.
Right.
Like you're still out there living your best life, but knowing, some of the things we've talked about privately, if anyone is prepared for the shit, it's you. If I was going to call anyone tomorrow, if the things happen, you would be the first guy I would think of, because you got your shit on lock. So I guess I'll just, use that as an opportunity to open the floor and just let you take it where you want to take it based on that premise.
Yeah. Well, that's there's a lot of kind words there, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, true.
I continue to play with lots of different scenarios. And so I just, like, sometimes for an hour or two or three, I'll just let my mind just wander into, what if this and what if that and what if, and I've done that for years for my profession, as an action philosopher hired to help companies or individuals with strategy. It's a huge part of what I do, is take in all the information, take in the problems they're trying to solve, ideal outcomes, and then just play in this sort of, ether space of like, what if, and just see what comes. It's like fishing, it's like, here's the bait. What idea, is going to come and latch onto that, and then I'll come out of this, space, and there will usually be 2 or 3 ideas worth exploring. So when I started, in 2020, when I was watching everything unfold, like in comically authoritarian fashion, I was like, this is amazing. Like, all of my rebel tendencies are getting to come out and play, because this is fantastic. Like, I missed this part of myself. The Ferris Bueller, joker, jester, completely respectfully irreverent. It's like, I'm just going to live my life. So 2020 came, and it was fertile ground for that kind of stuff. And then I watched it get a little bit intense, when Jimmy Kimmel goes on and does his monologue and saying, how there's this debate of who should they help if the hospitals are overrun. And Jimmy Kimmel gets on his fucking show, and he was like, I don't think that's a hard choice. Vaccinated guy having a heart attack, please come in. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo, rest in peace, Wheezy. Like, this is on national television, and everybody's just clapping. I'm watching this. I'm like, this is how genocides start. So I'm watching all this happen, and I could feel that siren call of panic and fear. And like, I get why people want to build bunkers, and I get why, it feels attractive to, to take a retail approach to your survival. But that's only one possibility. And so I decided to play these sort of games in my mind of, let me see how dark I can handle it and have it still make sense within my belief system, like my spiritual beliefs, my beliefs about, life and why I'm here. And so I went to some pretty dark places. I absorbed a lot of information that was very, very uncomfortable. Looking throughout history where things have gotten pretty gnarly. And even today, there are unspeakable things that humans do to each other, and that are happening right now, and could I make sense of that from a spiritual level?
Right. That's the funny thing. Sorry to interrupt, but it's like, because we, in this period of time in America, have had a pretty cushy, easy go. We haven't had a war on our ground, right?
No.
And since the Civil War, I guess.
Right.
So we've had it very easy.
We're
super domesticated.
Yes.
And so we're thinking of these like doomsday scenarios and playing, war game in them as you describe. And meanwhile, there's multiple places on Earth right now where people's homes and apartments are just being blown to bits, and people are just vaporized every day. Thousands and thousands of people in many different places on Earth.
Yeah.
So what we're kind of preparing for, talking about preparing for, other people are experiencing like right now and right now and right now and right now.
Somewhere on Earth, it's always been happening, and it always will be happening. Yeah. And
goddamn duality.
Yeah. And we're not equipped for it. Our brains aren't equipped to, and really we're not equipped to understand the realities of violence, unless somebody's experienced extreme kinetic activity, being shot at or shot, being punched, being threatened. Unless somebody's experienced that, there's no way that our minds and our bodies and our brains are equipped to understand what that's like. And so through 2020 and 21, I could feel the draw, like when you're driving down the road and there's a car accident on the other side, and you're like, hurry up, everybody, hurry up, come on, let's go. And then you pull up and you go and you stop, and then somebody's honking at you. I could feel the urge to look at the horrors, especially the potential horrors. And what if you're not allowed to buy groceries unless you're quadruple vaccinated? What if there's a QR code or a chip implanted in your arm and your social credit score is dropped a little too low? And what then?
You can't get gas.
Pull
up to the Shell. It's like, denied.
Yeah, you've already had a steak this month, so here's your cricket burger,
We saw that Instagram post.
Yeah.
We listened to that podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I began to look at all of that and just start to play what if. What if that happened? And honestly, man, I got excited. I was like, I did not come here to this dimension, to this time and this space. I did not get born into this body to play the boring level. Like, I came for the fucking awesome level. Like, and to be real, my soul must have picked like the lame setting, because like, we're going to make it as easy as possible this time. You're going to be a straight, white, North American, blue-eyed male. Easy level.
With cool parents.
With amazing parents. Yeah. And these parents are going to love you unconditionally and stay out of your way. So you're not going to go to school. You're never going to sit behind a desk. You're never going to take a test. You're never going to raise your hand to ask if you can go to the bathroom. Like, you're going to live a Tom Sawyer life in the 70s and 80s. In the 70s, there was 15,000 families in the United States that did homeschooling, and we were one of them. And now there's like over 3 million, which is epic. So my soul was like, easy level, here you go. But when all this stuff started happening in 2020 and 21, I was like, oh, now everything starts to make more sense. Why have I been so interested in self-reliance and as you said, largely unaware of so many other structures, structures of control and of assimilation and conformity. And like, I just was never really part of that. Even my business, martial arts, it's an unregulated industry. So there's no barrier to entry. Anybody can open a martial arts school. There's no oversight. There's no regulation. It is infinitely more regulation to cut hair or be a massage therapist than to open a martial arts school, which is mind-blowing. Even if you open a gym, you have to have like a certification or something. Martial arts, nothing.
Is it still that way?
As far as I know.
Wow.
It's incredible. So I started to see why all these environments either appealed to me or I just found myself in them. And I thought, man, this is just the same thing. Because if things do get weird, and I began to just make spreadsheets and journaling and mind maps of all the ways it could get weird. And every time I'd feel a little bit of resistance, like, ooh, that's scary. Like I've just learned to interpret that sensation of fear as a green light, not a red light. And it's like, oh, why am I afraid of that? Because if I zoom way out, like I'm not a deather. I don't believe in death. So is it death I'm afraid of? No. So what am I afraid of? I'm afraid that I won't be able to help or protect the people that are close to me. I'm afraid that I'll die a boring death instead of a glorious one. I'm afraid, and I just could isolate all the fears. And I realized, man, my imagination is kicking in to create fear where none exists. And once I kind of purged that out of my system or my thinking, then I started gamifying it. And then I just started having fun. And I was like, man, what a time to be alive. And I feel strongly that I'll live to be 150. So I'm a third of the way there. I got another 100 years, and then maybe I'll see if I renew my lease. But I can see way past all this weirdness, and it has to happen. I don't know how. And maybe it won't, but we're due. Like we're due. And all of these false structures, from education to finance to food, religion, and the pros and cons of that. This place has been so fake for so long, but you can't stop the evolution of consciousness. Consciousness is going to keep expanding. And now you got transhumanism and trans everything else, and there's all these other things. And it's like, awesome. That's just variety. But what do I want to experience? What's the subjective reality that feels most aligned with natural principles? And it's a return to self-reliance, deeply connected interdependence with people that you're really close to, people that you know would have your back, people that you trust implicitly. And I just thought, man, if shit really hit the fan, and tactically speaking, let's say that there was an EMP, or let's say that 1,000 Venezuelan, Mexican drug cartel cells got activated with pagers all at the same time. And there was like September 11th times 10,000 on the same day that there's an EMP. What if that happened? Whether I made it through that with a body alive or not is irrelevant to me. Like I don't care. What I would hope for and what I do pray for is to be as agile and as mobile as possible so that I could thread the needle, jet ski around those waves, be in the right place at the right time, which I think we have a lot of control over, be guided to serving and connecting and contributing to the people that I can be of most value to and who can support me. And if that's the case, and that gets heightened as a result of whatever external factors happen, then we're going to get through the other side of that more human than we've ever been. Because as we are, there's a tendency to glorify the past, I think. It's like simpler times, we've all seen the memes, like not a phone in sight,
Yeah.
People are stabbing each other.
Yeah.
But I think there's a tendency.
No air conditioning either. Come on, guys.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, man. I grew up without air conditioning in South Texas, so I'm just like nostalgic.
But I think we think about, we idealize, say 15,000 years ago, right? Hunter-gatherer people. And we just think, oh, yeah, you just wake up in the morning, you pick a few berries, and then the men go out hunting, the women hang out with the kids and, keep the camp going and the social cohesion. And we all sing Kumbaya around the fire every night, and we forget there were motherfuckers from the tribe down the road coming to scalp us all. You know what I mean? It's like, there's been no time in human history where we were all just completely safe and secure. Right. And I'm sure there's been suffering of different, at every turn, of different varieties at every turn.
Yeah. And that, to your point, I think the menu is just going to keep expanding of human experience, from absolute misery and the most intense suffering that we can't even imagine. That's just going to keep expanding. But so is the beautiful, so is the sublime and the miraculous. Like, that's going to keep expanding too. So the menu, before it was like, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and now it's like 32 flavors. But I think 50 years from now, it will be like you're literally limited by your imagination. And so I do think that a correction is inevitable. Whether it's economic, conflict, I think that is inevitable. And it's brought me not just peace of mind, because I don't think that has as much to do with the resources as it does your internal resources, but it's brought me a sense of excitement, man. Like as I look at, having a food library that's got months and months of food, as I look at, water and redundant water supplies, and as I look at community and people and connections, like, that's wealth, man. And then your ideas and your imagination and your initiative and your ambition, like, that's real wealth. So if something happened and the lights went out, or, martial law is declared, or FEMA camps are set up, yes, I'm sure that there's a timeline where that happens. Would that involve me? It might not. And I don't find it useful to burn mental energy trying to figure out, what would I say to a UN blue helmeted guard when he was like, get in the, van, and I'll be like, section 241, 242, bitch, it's like, I just don't find that useful. It's fun to think about, would I go full Wolverines, and just Red Dawn his ass? Or would I be like, oh, let me go experience what it's like inside a FEMA camp? Or would I run a zigzag line? Or, there's just too many things to think about. And at some point, it's like you just bungee jump. It's like you go in as far as you can, and then you just come right back to your baseline. So I've enjoyed thinking about things like that up until the point that it's not useful. And then I'll just come back to, doing my work and living my life. But in those explorations, in making peace with what seem like worst case scenarios, there seems to be a lot of power in that. Because then you don't get that unconscious, twinge of like, oh shit, what happens? If like, oh, I'm exposed. I've already gone to the end of the end of the end. And I've visualized some intense stuff. Like, I've seen dying of torture, I've seen myself, starving to death. And I've seen myself watching people that I love starve to death and all of that. But I've only done that for inoculation, to sort of like, okay, that's possible. But it seems much more useful and much more practical to weave in basic preparation with living a connected, fulfilled, fun, creative life. And I just don't see any more. I did in 2020, but I don't see a difference between those anymore. Like, to go to, load up to add to your food library, or to get some range time in, and then to play some piano and work on a novel, and then go on a date, and then go write some content. Like, that all feels like a day in the life. It doesn't, there's no contradictions in there.
I recently signed up for this subscription service called Quantum Upgrade, and it's been a major game changer for my energy, EMF resilience, and the overall feeling in our home. Let me explain how it works. Quantum energy is the energy that supports all life in the universe. It's nonlinear, non-local, and has an immense potential for health when it's harnessed and directed to you or into your living environment. Through many years of research and development, Quantum Upgrade created one of the world's most potent sources of usable quantum energy. So when you sign up for their service, Quantum Upgrade associates your home, car, phone, business, and even your pet with this energy. The energy you receive with the Quantum Upgrade is a high consciousness field that you can even customize on the fly. For example, I like to set different booster levels at specific times, such as before a podcast recording or during sleep. It's pretty awesome. The Quantum Upgrade energy streaming service has already been studied and tested by independent institutes, doctors, and labs with phenomenal results in placebo-controlled double-blind studies. It's been shown to improve red and white blood cells and even reverse stages 1 and 2 of blood clotting in only a few minutes. You can try it right now risk-free with a 15-day free trial by visiting quantumupgrade.io. All you got to do is use the code Luke15 to activate your free trial. Again, you'll find it at quantumupgrade.io. One thing that I think about in this realm sometimes is when I picture worst case scenario, the most security I can imagine is in community.
Big time.
And, not necessarily having a concrete plan, but, having, your little black book of like, all right, who are the like-minded people with whom I could collaborate and, and find a way to support one another. And then sometimes though, I think about what value other than like a decent personality and a little charisma, can I add to that? Like, I'm not a great marksman. I suck using my hands. I'm not good with tools, on and on and on.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a specialist, right? I don't have like a special skill. And I even think about this, if I was me, back in the day in a hunter-gatherer tribe, like what role would I have? The guy who talks all day or asks people compelling questions? It's funny. It's kind of an assessment I make of myself. And I really don't know the answer other than, my compassion and empathy and that I really care about people and I'm an honest person. I have a lot of value, I think, in terms of my integrity and my character, but in terms of like real life boots on the ground skills, I'm quite lacking, to be honest.
Well,
and one of the ways I explore this, by the way, is Alice and I watch the survival shows like Alone and Naked and Afraid. I mean, we've seen every episode of every season. I'm obsessed with these shows because you just get to see the human experience and the dynamics of people working together, working against one another, and so on. But it is also very humbling because I watched one a couple nights ago, this version of Alone, I think it's called Beast, where they drop 3 expert survivalists in, the Arctic, right? And they have a fresh killed moose and they have no tools. All they have is the clothes on their back. And they have to survive between the 3 of them 30 days with just this one animal. And I'm like, they're making cutting tools with rocks. I mean, they're doing like the coolest shit. And I'm sitting there going, dude, I don't know how to do one of those things. They're making fishing line out of this what's it called? Senwi, the tendons and like weaving that together. I mean, just crazy shit that's so fun to watch, but it's also very kind of emasculating and deflating. Because I'm like, if I was on that, they flew me onto that team of 3 right now, they would kick me off. Because I'm like, you suck.
Or eat you.
You're a burden. You don't know how to do anything. All I could do is be like, hey, let's stay positive. You guys want to meditate, Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that, but I guess it's like,
well, dude, but
something for us to contemplate is like, what value do we have to contribute if we know that, hey, the glue of a micro community or a micro nation, someone like you that has some land and, you have a team of people out there that all have various skills and stuff. If you want the safety in numbers, what's your contribution to that safety? It's an interesting self-inquiry.
It's a great inquiry. And one thing I appreciate about your sharing of that is your emotional sobriety of the gap between who you are today, who you've developed yourself into, and who you might need to become in a more extreme situation. And not doing the typical thing of like, oh, I'd just go hunting. I'm like, bro, you've literally never hunted, number one. Number two, you and 7,000 other people are all going to have that idea. So after a week, there's no more game in the woods.
Yeah.
Or is there? Because when you get out there with 7,000 other people and you're like aiming at the one squirrel and all of a sudden you catch some motion out of your eye and you're in the sights of somebody else because you've got more meat on you than a squirrel, like people are not equipped to play these games. And if they do play these what if games, they tend to severely overestimate what they think they could do right now. Or they just check out. It's like some circuit breaker and they'll just be like, oh, well, if it's my time, it's my time. Cool. Or occasionally they'll be like, well, I can fast. I'm like, Sure, buddy. And you can. I mean, I've got a client right now who is training for a 42-day fast, like full on Jesus level. Like he's going to go 42 days, done multiple 21 days. So I get it. I mean, there's all these things, but I really respect what you said, because you're owning, what I heard was you're owning your awareness of the gap between who you are, your current skills, your current level of resilience or abilities, and what you know would be required based on exposure to these shows, which I think is very useful. And my take on that, or my response, is just being aware that there's a gap and not immediately assuming that you would know what to do, and not immediately just saying, well, I would just check out. That's a superpower by itself, because the ability to know what you don't know, or to say, I don't know what I don't know, but I'm game. Like, just like, let me see what's available. And all of a sudden, intuition, resourcefulness, like good old fashioned fucking grit, all that comes to the surface. And people are capable of so much more than this modern life requires. So when you get into an environment where it's required of you, dude, the number of modern stresses that are going to completely go away if this ends up happening, incredible. And a part of me does like, oh man, this is going to be good for people. Like, this is going to be really good. You have trouble off your phone for a while? Cool.
It'll be like a mass vision quest.
Dude, it literally will. And it will be like everybody having an intense psychedelic journey all at the same time. And some people are like, I can fly. And other people are like, the guitar's trying to eat me. And they're in the same trip. And I think you have control over that, you know? And no matter what, it's all good. And that's the fun of it. Even the seeming forces that, seem to oppose, like that dude that collapsed my lung when I was 20 years old, he was not my foe. He was my divinely appointed ally. Like, I have love for that guy for doing what he thought he needed to do to win the fight, which ended up resulting in him winning the fight, me getting this complete, debilitating evolutionary experience, which was the raw material to shape myself into who I am today, which I couldn't have done without him. So take him out and put in antagonist du jour, like, who is the antagonist? That's my divinely appointed partner, and I'm theirs. So ultimately, man, I think we are all on the same team. Like, we're all on Team Human. Even the ones who seem to oppose by playing the role of politician or policy enforcer or, FEMA guard or whatever. They're all part of the same team. And I can only speak subjectively. I only create and only draw into my experience that which vibrates at the level of consciousness that I'm at. So a couple of years ago, I think I told you the story. I walked into my very nice home in a very nice part of Austin and found a dude standing in my hallway, pointing a pistol at me saying, "Don't make me shoot you." And I was like, fair enough, I won't. And I ended up creating some distance and didn't get shot. Went back to the house. He was gone. Cops are there. And the guy was just knocking over houses. He'd hit a couple of other houses and, stole some of my stuff, stole my gun. And that night, I just realized, man, this is such a beautiful opportunity to practice this empowered meaning creation. Because it's a meaningless event. That's not a new concept, but it doesn't mean anything. There was a man, there was another man, there was a gun, there was a house. Like, there was these very objective things that happened. So that night, once everything was all said and done, I just stood and I just fucking shook my body for like 3 minutes and just like verbalize and just like get it out, like shiver it out, like a zebra. There are no, to my knowledge, there are no trauma survivors, support groups for lion attacks. It's like all the gazelles and zebras get together every week and they talk about their lion attack. And, how was it, Billy? It was awful. I was at the watering hole and the lion, he almost got me. It's okay, Billy. We've all been there. Like, I don't think that exists in nature. They just shake it out and they're done because they don't have this same attachment as we do to story. It's like being very present. So I shook like crazy, let it out, felt really good, sat down, started writing. And the first thing I wrote was, why am I glad this happened? Like, why am I glad this dude showed up in my hallway pointing a pistol in my face? And it's like, the prompt generates the response. And then I just kept asking, what else is, like, why am I glad this happened? And then how did I create this? And why did I create this? And man, by the time I get to the end of a couple of pages of journaling, I felt love for that guy, man. Like, thank you for being such a perfect vibrational counterpart in the field that I've obviously been resonating in. Otherwise, you couldn't have shown up. Like, what a beautiful testament to the consistent behavior of this living universe in response to each individual's frequency. Like, that dude showed up perfectly on time in order to give me the raw materials of an experience that I get to decide what am I going to make out of it. It's just raw clay. If you get a lump of clay and you're like, oh God, I hate lumpy clay. Well, bro, like, make it into what you want to make it. And I can only hope, my prayer to this day is that guy got what he needed out of that experience. He's not a bad guy. I can only ever assume a positive intent. And maybe people don't know why they do things, or they make the best choice they can at the moment with what they think they have. But the only way that he and I rendezvoused is because our frequencies completely matched up. So all of that to say, let's assume that the lights go out, or let's say it's Tuesday, it's Wednesday, November 6th. And at the time of this recording, the release, we'll all be looking back going, oh, I remember what happened that day. Let's say that on that day, there's chaos because half the people's person didn't get selected. And they decide this means that they need to take matters into their own hands. And let's pretend that they all get angsty. And if it's one side and they're very, very well armed, that will be one thing. If it's the other side and they're just like angry, and they've got, like, I read your Lynch, I think, on What If All Hissed, great, interesting YouTube channel. He said, if there's an American Civil War, one side will be carrying AR-15s and the other side will bring katanas from their mom's basement. It's so
quite true.
Depending on what happens, let's say things go kinetic, it gets very intense, things start to feed one on the other. We've had all this like pent up anxiety and pent up anger and all this stuff has been there. Let's say it all bubbles to the surface. Throw in a few false flag events, carefully engineered to just amplify all this rage. Let's say that happens. Do I want to get involved? Zero. Dude, I'm so sideless. It's not even funny. There's no side that I feel like, oh, I'm on that side. I want to be there. And I've never felt that way, like my entire life. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I just know it's right for me. But let's say that happens and there all of a sudden the power's out and now you've got, militia roving the streets on one side and you got the National Guard is on the other, and then they start taking each other out. They're all divinely contracted to do that with each other. That's not part of my contract. Show me the contract. I didn't sign. So the only thing that I believe, the only thing that I can experience is what I've already been connecting to in that particular timeline. And in my case, it means everything's totally cool. Like, I know who my people are. I know where I want to be. And if I can't be there, my assumption is it's going to be someplace even better. Because if I'm writing the menu, why would the menu be good or awful? Like, why not good or better than I can imagine? Like, if that's a possibility and that's what I keep giving energy to, and if as a failsafe, philosophically, the worst possible scenario that I can think of is like dying, well, man, I wish for a glorious death. So if I, go out in the spring of 2026, I just want to see it coming. That's all. And maybe Instagram Live, I'm here in the foxhole and down to my last can of beans and as a cartel member. Okay, but like whatever. Like I'm so unattached to how that plays out that the peacefulness of that is it's its own game. And so then I just start to think about like, well, how can I be useful? Like that's why I appreciate this dialogue and you is like, there are ways to think through worst case scenarios that turn them into dreams come true. But it's not by controlling the scenario or controlling your resources. It's orienting yourself to what that would mean to you. And it's
Absolutely.
like, is it good? Is it bad? It just is. Recently I've been, it doesn't feel like a intentional vision. It just keeps coming in. But man, I keep seeing family. Like I keep seeing this just like radical woman or women. And there's just like this thermonuclear family with like 9 kids. Like I haven't had that vision ever in that particular way.
Listen up, ladies.
It's all right. And it's fascinating because I didn't have that as a goal. If you would ask me, 6 months ago, do you think you'll ever have kids? I'd be like, yeah, I can see it. There's definitely timelines where that is happening, but it's morphed into like desire. It's morphed into like, oh, that would be amazing. And the more that I think about it, the more real it feels, like the righter it feels. And then this part of me is like, now? Like, is this the time? And I'm like, well, I don't think that inspiration's coming in for nothing. I don't think that's an accidental vision. And so I'm just going with it. I don't know what it means, and I don't need to know what it means. But if it means that I connect with some radical chick who's like my polar equal, and we end up spawning some epic new humans who are here for their own agenda, and I'm just here to love them and protect them and stay out of their way and learn from them, sign me up for that. And if that means they grow up learning how to duck and cover and learning how to shoot and learning how to prepare, great. Like what an epic childhood. And easy for me to say now, not being partnered or not having kids, if it means that they are such advanced souls that they're here during a time where they beat the game in a year or 2 years, and that's their physical experience, so be it.
Beautiful. Well, they say age comes with wisdom, and I'm hoping that's true. But unfortunately, it also comes with wrinkles. So I'm going to let you in on a secret that's been soothing out my complexion and keeping my skin firm and toned. It's the red light face mask from Bond Charge. You might know Bond Charge as a holistic wellness brand with a huge range of science-based products to optimize your life. I'm a big fan and have been for quite a while. Their red light face mask emits both near infrared and red light, helping to boost the production of elastin and collagen in your skin. Treatment time's about 20 minutes a day, and because it doesn't obstruct your eyes, it doesn't even have to interrupt your flow. I just strap mine on, set a timer, and go about my day. Another great feature is that it's cordless and rechargeable. Plus, it puts out literally 0 EMF, which is super important, especially on a sensitive area like your face. So to get your red light face mask, here's what you do. Go to bondcharge.com/lifestylist and use the code lifestylist to get 15% off. Oh, and unlike other brands, Bond Charge very intelligently removed the blue and green light so you can be sure the mask won't disrupt your circadian rhythm or your sleep if you use it at night. Again, that's BONCHARGE, bondcharge.com/lifestylist, and that code again is also lifestylist. I love the emphasis on perspective and the self-awareness of the judgments that create meaning of our experiences. And it brings me back to that idea I was expressing about where would I fit in a worst case scenario? What value could I add? And as I watch those survival shows, there's two parts I really love is one, just the human ingenuity of just like how they do things physically, right? The idea is they get the inspiration, but probably even more so is watching who's going to crack mentally.
Yes.
Right? And someone will come on and they'll have an incredible skill set. And you're like, oh, this lady's going to crush it. This guy's going to crush it. And then they tap out 2 days in. You're like, what? And it's always the mind that gets them. They go dark, they go negative. And once you see that happen, you know they're about to tap out.
Yep.
And those are the situations I can actually transpose myself into a little bit more. And who knows, how tough and resilient I could really be. I don't know. I'd have to be tested. But based on my experience thus far, I've been through some pretty harrowing stuff and have managed to come out the other side. And I'm pretty skilled at objectivity and neutrality and the awareness as the observer self when the mind goes right, wrong, good, bad, light, dark.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I'm playing in the duality thing. Okay, it has a purpose. We're here. I'm in agreement with that. Consciousness created this thing for us so that we have a school, right? And I volunteered to be in the school, and the school has bullies. And the school also has best friends and awesome people, right?
And sometimes they're the same person.
Yeah, in your case, sometimes they're pointing a gun at you when you walk in your crib.
Yeah.
But I think that is some value that I would actually have in that kind of situation.
It's a huge value.
Is to not go dark, to not go negative, to be able to hold the line and to realize that everything that happens is truly neutral until one attributes meaning to it and names it good or bad.
Exactly.
And it's so verifiable too, because if I go back in my life, 30 years, one of my teachers, like you might have this when you walk by, in the drugstore and you see a bottle of baby oil, or you see a P. Diddy post about a bunch of baby oil, and you're like, fuck yeah, I love baby oil. For me, it's Rottweilers.
Okay.
Yeah. Many years ago, I was drunk at a party and big ass Rottweiler bit me on the face. I have like a big scar on my nose from it. He just was like, no thanks, chomp, and just bit me on the face. There's a whole other story that unfolded from that, but you could look at that and go, oh, that was horrible. What a horrible thing. Well, next thing you know, the owner of the dog, who was my dealer at the time, calls me and says, hey, man, I found out we have renter's insurance. Why don't you get a lawyer and sue us and get some coin? I was like, great. Got a lawyer, sued him, got like $7,500, which was like $75,000 to me at that time.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
You'd be like, okay, let's label that good. You got a bunch of money, right? He also bought me a bass, bought me a Fender Precision bass, which is pretty nice. He's a nice guy. And so you think, man, I got a bass, I got $7,500. You could say, well, the dog bite was kind of awesome. I lived, right now I have all this money.
Yes.
Spent all the money on heroin, of course, because I never had that kind of money and a habit at the same time. They both converged, and I got a really, really bad habit. And when the money ran out, I had no way to support that habit because of the tolerance, right? So you say like, oh, that's horrible. You got that money because you got so strung out. Now, fast forward, I realized I painted myself into a corner with that habit, and there's no way I could have stayed well. So eventually I checked into rehab, so you could say that dog saved my goddamn life. And when I see Rottweilers, I have two reactions. One is kind of, my body still remembers what it's like to see the tonsils of a big Rottweiler. But my conscious thought right after that is like, oh, thank you, Rottweiler, man. You saved my life. And the only thing that changes that experience is purely perspective. It's just
all interpretation.
Flexibility of perception. Right? That there's no good or bad, only thinking makes it so.
Yes.
And I think in this realm, that we're talking about, the unknown and the what ifs, what's going to shape the next few years for all of us as in this tumultuous, crazy ass, unpredictable time is that very thing, is to be able to go, let me wrestle this into an experience that is for my highest good, no matter what it looks like on the surface, because there will be some point in the future we'll be able to look back in hindsight, as you did in the hospital bed, and go, oh man, that was the catalyst for the greatest change in my life, or one of them, and that's something I always just try to keep in my awareness when when I'm tempted to judge any experience, person, etc., as bad. It's like having the humility to say, I actually don't know.
Right.
On its surface, this sucks really bad, but can I really know that to be true?
Right.
It's too soon to tell.
Right.
We don't know. Could be the best thing ever. The house burns down. Oh God. Well, then I end up living in Hawaii, and on a, banana farm or something, going, oh my God, Texas? Are you kidding me?
Right.
That house sucked. We're in a
Right.
tiki hut now with
Right.
spring water. This is amazing.
Well, and I love the way you put that, man. There's so much gold there, because your choice, it's like the choice you make before the event to just say everything you just said. If it happens, we'll see. And within that space, you have such a blank canvas to just start assuming a positive outcome. And if that's the assumption, and our intent has such an impact on what we're able to physically see, and I believe it has an effect on what actually starts showing up. If that's the case, then it truly is all good. And then in a shit hits the fan scenario, if you're the guy that's like keeping everything chill, and what maybe it's a leadership position, maybe you're just learning super fast what to do. Like, show me how to, show me how to shine the flashlight, show me how to do this, and you learn quick. And then, there's a lot of value in that. But there's something you said that brought me back to a couple months ago. I did a escape room, which I'd never really experienced before. I kind of judged them because I'm like, you guys are going into this place with all these problems to solve. And then you come out and then you go back to your life where you've got all these problems to solve that you're avoiding solving, but you can go to here and you can act like, so I was pretty judgy, but then I did it, and we were in two teams and we're like competing and all this stuff. And there was a moment where we're coming down to we have 12 minutes left in the thing, and we're competing against this other team, and we're in some room, and we have to figure out how to open this gate to go down this slide. This is supposed to be like a sewer escape.
Is this here in Austin?
Here in Austin, yeah, it's downtown. And so there's 4 or 5 of us on our team, and it was a pretty elaborate puzzle because there was a lock. And it had 5 letters. You had to get a 5-letter combination. You had to guess the word. So there's clues all over this place of how to find the letters. And we're like under a time crunch, and we still got a lot of puzzles to solve. And I don't know what came over. I mean, I do, but I just thought, well, it's only one word. And there's a future version of me that already won the game because somebody else figured it out or whatever. So at some point, we know what the word is. I wonder if I can just know the word. So I just looked at the thing, and I just looked at it, and I just closed my eyes, and I just imagined it being figured out, and I opened, and I fucking knew the word.
No way.
And I entered the word into the locked dials, and it pops open.
No way, dude.
And the word was freed.
Oh. Well, there you go.
So it's not non-obvious. And everybody's like, how did you know? I was like, I'll tell you later. We've got to beat the game. And I just think about that because, what if the solution is always at hand, and it's only because of being over logically trained or overly reliant on memory and knowns that we think we can't just know? What if you can just know? And what if knowing is a skill? And the more that you practice knowing and then going with what you know and observing the result, what if that becomes a superpower? I began to test that in, creating content and materials and speeches. Every time I try and plan out a video or plan out my talk, it just felt like, and I'm no stranger to scripting and rehearsal and preparation, and I know the value of that. But when I would just chill out and get really quiet and just listen and be like, what do people need? What are they asking for that I'm not thinking about, that I can be suited to support? And I just began shrinking the timeline of like my own need to know to now. Like I only need to know what I'm going to say right now. And I'll know what to say when the next now shows up. Then I began to test that. And dude, it became remarkable. Like the relevance of the content, the connection to people, like actually feeling other people, not just feeling the response that I thought needed to happen, like all of that stuff. And a few years ago, I'm like, I need to test this. Like, what would it be like to be in this pure presence for like an extended period of time, like while delivering, you know? And so I announced on Facebook that I was going to do a 24-hour Facebook Live, totally improv. So I announced it, and everybody's like, oh, we'll see. And Saturday morning, 9:00, I went on, and I was like, all right, guys, we're starting a 24-hour Facebook Live. This is completely unscripted. We're no idea where this is going to go. And dude, I riffed nonstop for 24 hours.
What?
Nonstop. Like, it was stories, and it was Q&A, and it was live guided meditations, and I'd like play the keyboard, and then I would like mess with people on, you know, in the comments, and I would tell another story, and then I'd be like eating. People were like sending me food from all around the world. Like one woman in Canada, she like found a sushi place and had it sent over, and then like I had a female friend that came over and very covertly like gave me a foot massage while I'm like on my laptop, and then she like snuck off. She's like, bye. It was like so much going on. At one point I had to go to the bathroom, and so I was on my balcony, and I've got the laptop.
Number one or number two?
Number one.
Okay,
yeah.
that's good.
I can number two. I wouldn't have cared either, but it just you program your mind. It's like didn't happen. But I'm on the balcony, and I'm peeing off the side of the balcony, and one guy was on there, and he was like, "Oh, this is a live stream." Nice. But it was, dude, at the end, and there's people that stayed on for like 18 hours. I mean, they were just like in it because they were feeling that something.
Kind of a Truman Show type thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, and they were like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And so there's just that beautiful immediacy of the energy. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen, but it can't be bad. Like it's going to be good. And dude, when it got to the last hour of that, there was so much emotion, and everybody was feeling it. And people were like, what is this? Like something's happening. Everybody was like, hundreds of people are on, and they're commenting. They're like, what is going on? And I'm like fucking bawling. I'm like, I don't know, but God damn, this is like the most beautiful thing ever. It was like a near-death experience. It was just like this something. And when it finished, I just felt like this. It was just like a slow clap from God, you know? It was just like, good job. You know, you don't need to work as hard as you think you need to. Like just chill out, go with it, and you'll always be provided for. And I'll never forget that experience because it was so co-creative. You know, every single person that was a part of that experience was creating that experience. And it was one of the most pure examples or demonstrations that I've ever seen of, you know, when we really surrender to purpose and expand our awareness to appreciate and include other people without needing anything from them, without needing them to change, and without censoring ourselves. And we just open up and just say what needs to be said. Nothing to hide and nothing to prove. Man, the juice that's available, like the power that's available that comes to us, I don't know that there's a limit to it. And if that's the case in a non-emergency situation, then I can only imagine that it would be massively multiplied in an emergency situation. And that's why there's a significant part of me that's like, that would be epic. Like, what would it be like? Like to improv on the fly, iterate fast, like instant bonding with the right people, instant, like, separation from the wrong, like it would just be, it's like you're at home playing chopsticks on the piano and all of a sudden, boom, you find yourself in a jazz band and you're at Madison Square Garden and you're just like trying to keep up. Like same idea, different stakes, and sign me up for that.
Yeah, with the flexibility of reality amplified. There's a lot more potential for magic.
Yeah.
I used to have this friend and he was pretty tapped in, and we would do this thing where we would go invisible. And it would usually be if we were trying to get in a club or a restaurant, there's a long line, we don't have a ticket, we're not on the guest list kind of thing. And he would go, we're just going, he was much older than I, and he goes, don't worry about it. And I was like, oh, we can't get in, we're not on the line. He goes, no, we just go invisible. And I would just like follow, walk in his shadow, and we would just like walk through the door. No one would see us. Doorman, we were literally invisible.
Yeah.
We did that quite a few times. Yeah. I'd get inside and go, dude, how did you do that? And I was like, I told you, man, you don't get it.
Yeah.
You don't get it. You making your own reality.
Yeah.
Well, and I still don't really get it, but a lot of the things you're speaking to are within the, the ability to kind of create your own reality in the moment, and so if your moment is filled with intensity, as these situations likely would be that we're kind of exploring here, I mean, that does seem like a rich opportunity to do that, right? If you need to go invisible to, sneak past the UN guard that doesn't want you to go down this particular road that's going to take you to where your bug out location is, then it's like, whoa, that's actually very useful.
Yeah.
And you might not have the impetus to go invisible to learn how to do that unless you're put in that situation.
Yeah.
Trying to get in some club is a very low stake way to do that, but still, it's still a demonstration of what's possible. When you believe something strongly enough, all of a sudden reality starts to mold to your reality.
It's malleable.
Yeah.
And it really is. I heard there was an example, I think it was an Abraham Hicks audio or something, but there was a guy who was talking about, there was like a shaman who was going to get on an airplane, but he had like this, big staff with him, which you're not supposed to take an airplane. But his belief was so strong, and he was in such integrity with his belief that there was not only was there nothing wrong, but this was the most natural thing in the world. And so he just gets on the plane and sits down, and he's got his staff. And the question, I think, to Esther Abraham was like, what's that all about? And I thought it was an interesting answer that in this example, the shaman, was in a state of total non-resistance. Like there was just no push against what was happening. And I was actually talking to Brandon Williams about this when he was in town for our group and on your podcast. And I actually spent a lot of time with him that week. And, I haven't done probably 90% of the remedies and the steps and the things. I just never have a problem. And I just don't participate energetically, physically, contractually. I just don't participate, and I never have any problems. And Brandon made the comment. He said, you just embody this. Like this is not a belief for you. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like this is just who you are. And I was like, yeah, actually, like it's who I've always been. And great credit to my parents for just loving me and staying out of my way. The concept of someone else telling me what to do is insane to me. Like it's insane to me. But if I respect someone, or if they're getting results that I desire to get, I will be aggressively curious, respectful and curious. But I don't experience humility. I don't experience like the lowering. It's like, yeah, I mean, if it's jujitsu, of course you can tap me out. And of course, like I'm going to learn. And I want you to tap me out as fast as possible and as many times as possible. But there's no humility in that. It's just an extremely aggressively respectful curiosity. And I don't know, that just seems to be the most useful way that I've found yet to approach uncertainty. is this aggressive curiosity. But there's no, there's no, let me be small or let me shy away. It's like, no, man, lean in. And I think that when we're in that frequency, like that 24-hour Facebook Live, or, your ability to just turn the Rottweiler incident into this beautiful benefit, even with all the choices you made, it's clear in your body language and the way you talk about it that you have an appreciation for that. Like, that's a skill. And if we have that ability, I think it really switches the dynamic of one's life from, so many people are going through life with struggle and discipline and willpower, and you got to make it happen. And it's like they're like rock climbing, and they're just an inch at a time, and they're hanging on for dear life, and everything they want is at the top of the rock, and they're climbing El Capitan in their life, and they're just like, and they're terrified of falling, but and it's like, that's their life. I'm like, no wonder you're exhausted, man. But that's only one way of living life. It's not the only way. What if, switch the metaphor, you're not on the face of El Capitan being blown around by the wind and trying not to die and climbing up. That's not where you're at. You are at the top of the most epic snowboard run, and you're strapped into a badass board, and the weather's perfect, and you got some good jams, and there's trees, but they're really spaced far apart, and the powder is fresh, and it's like that perfect powder, and everything that you want is at the bottom of that hill. And there's a hot tub, and all your friends are there, and all you got to do is just kick off the lip and just enjoy the ride, and you just go. And the wind's in your face, and the trees are there, but they're very easy to navigate around, and you don't wish that they weren't there. You're glad they're there. Like, they give you contrast. As you go by one, you're like, whoa, I'm going fast. That's cool. And you don't protest that there's trees on the hill. You're just like, oh, there's trees. I will not ski into the tree. Cool. And you're listening to the jams, and the sun's overhead, but you got to stay present. And how are you getting there? It's you're partnering with gravity. You're partnering with natural forces. You're not fighting it. You're not forcing it. You're not pushing it. You're guiding it. Like you said earlier, you're just with the rudder. Like, the wind is blowing and the waves are there, and you're guiding. You're partnering with that natural force. And you're not in a hurry to get down there because the ride is so enjoyable. And you know that you're going to enjoy your friends and be in the hot tub, and everything you want is down there, but you're not in a hurry to get there because this moment is so rewarding. And because of the speed and the perfect powder and the jams and the sun, it's like this extended awareness that this is a perfect moment. And you can't dwell on the past because the present is so compelling. And you're focused on what's right in front of you, but not too far in front of you, because you already know it's going to come. And next thing you know, you finish this epic run, and you go right in where all your friends, and they're cheering, and you sort of take off your snowsuit and jump in the hot tub, and there's a hot toddy or wheatgrass or whatever the fuck you want to drink, and all your friends are there, and you're like, wow, that was an epic run that didn't require any of your own motive force. It was just happening because you partner with gravity. And man, there's no right or wrong, but the metaphor of struggling and climbing and scrabbling through life, that's only one option. Partnering with these natural forces, which does require a more feminine energy, more softening and being more receptive and listening more, and then trusting yourself to listen, and then taking action on whatever the impulse is. But that's a very ingrained trait in human beings. We all had it when we were kids. Most people lost it through schooling, not education. They lost it through schooling and a complete, almost total destruction of their individuality. But if you got a heart that beats, and you can put air in your lungs, and you can think, then you can always tune back into that frequency, and it's always there. And I think combining your interests, like if somebody's listening to this or they're, interested in resiliency and preparedness, then this might spark some thoughts on what to do next. And people might be listening to this because they're just huge, Luke Storey fans. They're like, oh, let me see the next episode. And they're just like, what is this guy babbling on about? And it doesn't interest them. Honor that, like whatever that interest is. If it interests you, then you get to follow it. If it doesn't interest you, then you don't have to follow it. And there's no right or wrong. There's only what's right for the individual right now.
It's the Tao. That's what comes to mind. It's always available.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like, oh, it was there.
Yeah.
It's or never, the Force,
it's
right?
Never
in
not,
Star Wars, right? It's like the Force is always there. It's just which one of the characters is skilled at tapping into it and believes in it enough to actually put forth the effort to learn how to tap into it.
Yeah.
And I guess when you do, you can walk past the guards and say, these aren't the droids you're looking for.
There's not the droids you're looking for. Or you can get into the club. Or you can be pushing your shopping cart past a smoked out bunker and get an idea to turn right. And you turn right. And as you turn right, the fucking UN tank rolls by at where you were a moment ago. I mean, is there a limit? I don't think so.
So cool, man. It's funny because I didn't really plan because I just knew we would have a great spontaneous flow. Sometimes I'm more planned than others, but I had the idea that we would kind of, break down the categories. So, you got to have ammo and walkie-talkies. And it's like, I feel like that is so kind of irrelevant at this point. I feel like that's another...
Well, there's a lot of places you can go to get that information.
All right, so maybe, without us creating another 2-hour podcast on the back of this one, what are some practical, non-insane resources for people that they might be able to check out? I know you shared with me your Telegram group that has checklists of things like that for people that are like, okay, cool, I'll work on the mindset thing and I'll get in the Tao, but I also should I need candles, batteries, a generator. I mean, there are some real world things that are maybe of value. What's kind of a synopsis of where people might go to as they say, trust God, but tie up your camel.
Right. Well, the first question that I always ask people is, where are they on the spectrum of what they think might be likely? Because that's always a good starting point. If somebody is like brand new to this stuff and all they've done is watch, A Tale of Us or Mad Max or whatever, and they're just like haven't really thought about it as it applies to their life, then they're in a different starting point than someone who's studied history, realizes that we're like due for some sort of major conflict, add in geoengineering and all this stuff. And they're like, oh shit, we could actually be looking at a total grid down situation. I'm not saying one of those is right or wrong, but it totally depends on the individual. So somebody watching this this is the first time they've ever thought about this, I would have very different advice for them than I would for somebody who has thought about it more or talked about it like we have or is actively preparing. So I just want to give that as a caveat before giving any kind of practical resources, because for the person who's more, I won't say advanced, but for the person who's thought about it more and has actually taken more steps, what I would advise someone just starting out would be to that person completely inefficient. That's not enough. But if I started to advise someone who's just curious and about to learn more, and I gave them what I'm doing or what someone else would be doing, it will blow them out. And then they'll be overwhelmed. They'll be freaked out. They'll be like, what do you mean you're catching food? You've got 17 different places and a color-coded map with chalk on telephone poles. What? It's too much, So I would just say that for anybody who's curious about preparing, to just check in with yourself and what do you think is a likely scenario. But for anybody, and I'll start from the beginning and assume that people aren't prepared, which is most people. Here in Austin, we've had 2 experiences in the last few years of the power going out because of the snowpocalypse, thing. So imagine you're going to be a week with no power. Everything's closed. You have no water because the faucets run on electricity. And what do you need to make it through a week? And it's really just a math problem. It's about 3,000 calories per day per person if you're pretty stationary. You need 1.5 gallons of water per day, and you need some basic energy, but nothing exorbitant. So if you've got some batteries and you got some flashlights, probably some books, some playing cards, because if you're not going to be going anywhere for whatever reason, you actually don't need that much. And if somebody just does that, if they're starting from scratch and they just do that, and they just imagine that we're going to go on a camping trip in our living room for a week, what do we want? And just come at it from that sort of, softer, gamified sort of thing. Once you do that, and I wouldn't suggest doing anything until you do that, then you can start playing different scenarios and running different simulations. The tendency, and I observed this in myself in 2020, is to just, if you get a little uncertainty going on, to deal with it like a good consumer and just try and buy your way out of your fear. So I've seen a lot of people get a little unsettled and then they go straight to Cabela's and they, buy a rifle and they buy 500 rounds and they get the dopamine flush and they walk out feeling like John Wick, and they're just like, yeah. I'm like, cool. Like if that makes you feel better, good.
That was me the week I moved to Texas.
Yeah. Well, there's use for this.
2021.
It's like, let me try this. But if you look at Maslow's hierarchy and you think about physical safety, so shelter, and then water, food, energy, and you just work your way up, you start to, it's like a little part of your brain gets activated because you start playing through different scenarios of what if I couldn't go out to get groceries for whatever reason? How much do I have in my place right now? And what else do I need? And if people play that game with themselves, if starting today, if I had to be in my place for, 3 weeks, what would I need? Do you need feminine hygiene products? Do you have toothpaste and toothbrush and floss? Do you have enough water for 21 days for everybody that's there, including your pets if you have pets? And when you start asking that question, you start seeing different areas of improvement that you can start, adding in. By the end of 2020, I had a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, and it was a nice place. I was at the W Hotel, but that place was stacked. I had just 5-gallon water jugs just stacked, and it was actually looked very cool. I made it look very, artistic. And so there was like the water wall, and then all the food was stacked in the shelves above. And then I did have some, guns and ammo, and it was weird, man, but it was like a luxury bunker. I was like, I got my stuff. If I had to stay here for 3 months, I could do it. With everything that's in my place, I could do it. And if I had another person with me, well, now I've got 45 days. And if I got 3 people, now I got 30 days. And you just start, it's cool how fast your brain starts playing the calculations. And then, as it turned out, when the snowpocalypse hit and I had all these supplies and all these stores, we didn't have power outages a lot, and we still had cell phones. But I got a text from a friend that there was a mutual buddy who lived in Cedar Park who's paralyzed, and his body doesn't generate body heat. And he didn't have any power in his house. So without an electric blanket, like the dude could freeze to death. He could be under 10 blankets and still get hypothermia. So I had my 4Runner, put it in 4-low, loaded up a generator, got a fuel can, drove to his house, and the highways are just desolated. There's just cars spun out on the side. And I went with a buddy of mine, and we're just driving. It's a little bit of snow. And we get to his place, and we take the generator, and his mom was there, and we showed her how to use it. Watching her, this 60-ish year old woman, pull this generator, fire it up, and then plug in the electric blanket, plug in his computer. And he's a badass entrepreneur. He's a multimillionaire, badass entrepreneur. Watch him be able to go to work and connect to his audience knowing that his body was warm because we were able to get him a generator, dude, it's the best feeling in the world. It's like, especially for a man, like a man's number one job is to create safety. Like that's the number one function of a man. In order to create safety, you have to be equal parts loving, but you also have to be lethal. Like if you're just nice and loving and kind, but you're not capable of protection, then you can't ever actually be peaceful. You're just harmless. And then the provision part, like to be able to provide for someone else something that they don't have, and is somebody who's in your circle or they're like under your protection, dude, it is the most incredible activation of your purpose. And within that, I think society is a blanket term, but I think humans need that, man. Humans need to feel important, and they need to feel like they matter. And if that's what it takes, is for some, global or massive experience where it's like, we're going to put you in technological timeout for a minute, and you're not going to have your phones for a while, and you're going to have to learn to get along, and you're going to have to learn to figure shit out. Like that will be nothing but a net positive. I don't even remember where we were. Beautiful. Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah.
Water, food, energy, know who your neighbors are. And if once you check all those boxes and you've got at least a week's worth of food and water and energy, like you said, candles, a generator is not a bad idea. Just do that. And you can get all that for a couple $100. Get all of that and have it set aside and just step back and check in and see how you feel. Do you feel more empowered? Do you feel like that's like a responsible thing to do? Then do more of it. If it freaks you out, and if the presence of all this food makes you worry about a zombie apocalypse, well then reconcile that in your own belief system before you start adding stuff on, because you're not going to be able to out-supply that philosophical weakness.
Yes, that is so crucial.
You just got to balance it.
Beautiful. Well, I'm glad we got to fit that in.
That's good, dude.
Yeah, and I'm glad we didn't start with that either, because whoever made it to the end here deserved to get that information as a reward. Thank you so much, dude. I knew this would be fun, and I'm so glad I just trusted my intuition as to when to, ask you to come join me. It's funny, sometimes I think I just forget that some of my friends would be great guests on the show, right? Just like, oh yeah, I know him. There's no novelty there because I see you fairly often, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, someday I'll do that. But I also really love it when somebody isn't how do I say this in a kind way, opportunistic and pushy because they want to sell some shit from coming on my podcast. I'll just say it plainly like that. And you've never hinted at, bugged me. Maybe you didn't. You never wanted to. I don't know. But I like it when it just happens organically when it's supposed to happen versus like me feeling ingratiated because like I know it could help someone out and like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like the right time, but they're kind of bugging me about it. And, it's much more fun when it just, is in the Tao, man.
It's in the Tao. And I think, and this will be just the last thing maybe. I work with a lot of, less now, but I have worked with a lot of people who are content creators and teachers and authors and entrepreneurs. And there's this constant conundrum of like, how do you create great content? What is it that makes great content? And I'm just like, man, if we really are messengers, like if we really are here to serve through authentic self-expression, well, then where does the inspiration to express come from? Is it purely internal? Do we get an idea from the ether that's like too big to ignore and then we have to share it? I think that's more likely, that's been more my experience. But then where is that coming from? And I think it's coming as a request from someone else or from others who are seeking a very particular kind of answer in their own like aggressive curiosity to try and figure something out. And I think that their request, that magnetic sort of vibrational request, is causing this delivery of the idea to those of us, and you are definitely one of these, who is a messenger. Then the idea that we get as messengers is not coming from us. It's coming to us, but it's coming from them. It's like being drawn through us like a conduit to refine and amplify and turn into this message for other people. And in that way, we don't own it. We have a responsibility to steward that, but it's coming from them. And so I think this, like the timing of this, like at the time of the recording, we're like days away from the most interesting thing.
I know. Well, it's funny that I don't know when this comes out, because I don't handle that part. You know, someone else does the publishing calendar. But it'll be interesting for people to watch this and listen to this, after next week. I mean, it's whatever happens, it's going to be entertaining.
It's going to be entertaining.
It's going to be,
and it's going to be empowering if that's what you've already decided in advance.
Right.
And if somebody votes, great. And if your person gets picked, you'll be happy. And if your person doesn't get picked, you'll be unhappy, because that's what you've already decided you're going to be. And if you're not picking at all, like I'm not picking, I don't know if you're picking, but it's like, if we're not picking somebody, then we're going to do our life anyway. Life goes on. And at the end of the day, you do always have that relationship with your future selves, and they're all trying to remember you. And if you can let yourself be remembered by the most badass, optimized, holistically tuned, harmoniously prosperous version of you, who's remembering you so that you can see their life and then adopt that behavior and beliefs, and then collapse time, and next thing you know, you're there. Like, that shit doesn't wear off, apocalypse or no.
How do people work with you? One thing that I know very little about you is the inner workings of like how you support yourself. And, I know you coach people and things like that, and you do things, but I've never actually asked you, like, what exactly do you do? I just know you have gifts and a lot of talent and knowledge, obviously, as people can tell now from listening to this. But if someone's listening, they're like, this dude's cool, I want to do stuff with him. What do they do? Where do they go? How does that work?
It's always moving around a little bit. I've been very appreciative to have remained strategically ambiguous for the last 11 years. And so I do coach, but I'm not a coach. I do.
Are you a coach that coaches coaches on how to coach coaches that coach coaches?
To the point that they're coaching me, I'm like, wait a minute.
I love
reciprocal.
I love the content creators that like make fun of people like me and people like you, know, especially in Austin. There's some such funny memes out there hilarious. About us, and
Yeah. Oh, it deservedly so. So I do coach, but I'm not a coach. I've created over 80 different courses.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's things that I've found useful and have tested enough to see a benefit in, that I feel confident in sharing it with somebody else as a description, not a prescription. So I've got a dozen different meditation courses, journaling programs. We have a full time piercing course that takes people through these guided time piercing journeys where you're actually being remembered by your future self. It's insane. Tons of stuff around healing. And then I started getting asked to create marketing and sales stuff, because I always knew how to market and sell from the karate school days. And then I created a program called Sell with Soul that people really seem to like a lot. And it just helps them to connect more to their message and be able to develop the confidence and the clarity in how to message more consistently in a way that's attractive to their audience. People really seem to like that program. And I'm not doing too many courses right now. I do steward a community for men, for entrepreneurs, that's called Sigma University. And that started back in January of 2024. It is an incredible group of dudes. Like it's men's work done very different. It's, one of our members said, this is like Abraham Hicks meets Fight Club. It's like a think tank meets locker room. And it is wildly vulnerable. Like, leave your shield at the door. Come on in. All of you is welcome here, as long as you just leave the victimization outside and just own what's going on. And it's incredibly healing, very powerful group of dudes, entrepreneurs who are really doing cool things. And the whole thing is just bound together with weapons grade sarcasm. And so it's like how guys used to be, And so it's a big
Start a movement. Make guys great again.
Make guys great. I'll go over huge. So that's been great. I do occasionally do some one-on-one advisory or consulting. And then starting in 2025, I'll be creating an event series that'll happen partly on my farm and partly in downtown Austin. That'll be for experienced entrepreneurs. The sweet spot is people who are running between $1 million and $5 million a year in revenue. But there's just certain things you've developed to get to that point, and there's certain problems you don't have yet. Like when you get around 10 million, your problems change. But we're planning a series of 4-day events that is really designed to help open the channels to your innate wisdom so that your business remains as much art as it is science.
Wow.
So it's going to be exciting.
You're an impressive dude. I'm glad to know you.
Thank you, man. Likewise.
Yeah, I need to come take some of your courses.
More to come.
I need that shit. I'm sold. We're going to put all of the show notes at lukestory.com/Jesse, and we'll, put your website, Instagram, Facebook, all the things there, and it'll be clickable in the show description on the podcast apps.
Cool.
In closing, I've got a 3-part question for you. Who have been 3 teachers or teachings, could be a person, a book, a philosophy, etc., that have informed who you are?
They're all important. And this may be cliche, but the older I get, the more accurate it is. My mom and my dad, the more that I see how different they were in their choices on how to raise me and my siblings, the more in awe I am at their choice to do things differently and follow their heart, follow their intuition. I've spoken at length in various different places, but my mom and dad, for sure, their dynamic, their relationship, even though they're divorced, the way they still relate to each other, is just so inspiring for me. And at the time of this recording, they are both actively preparing to stick the landing on a life well lived. So they're in the home stretch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I've had so many great mentors. Like I've just always been able to find myself in rooms where I'm, the dumbest, the weakest, the brokest, the slowest, the thickest, the most scared person. But I always saw a way to learn how not to be that. And so it would be tough to put it down to one person. My martial arts mentors and my martial arts instructors, specifically because it's a reality-based environment that doesn't have anything to do with theory. It has to do with results. And I think that's why what I hear from clients and students is that they're like, this is so different. It's like, yeah, because it's based on reality. It's not based on what sounds good or a state change, because I didn't grow up in those environments. I grew up in an environment where if you are going to talk about someone's technique, you better be able to back it up like on the spot, because there's going to be a physical confrontation if you're saying things that you can't back up. So I learned to only say things that I knew I could back up. And then I had business mentors who wouldn't accept stories about how business is. You don't answer a math problem with English. You answer a math question with numbers. And so I think that same sort of ethos is alive in the coaching and the teaching and the training today.